So, I'd like to tackle a question that I think comes up a lot these days, because a lot of people in my generation, younger generation, between 15 and 40, roughly, maybe even you could stretch that a little bit more on either side, likely, this generation is very, very dismayed at the reality that they may never own a home. Or at least it appears that way. And there's exceptions, and some of us are doing well, and if you work hard enough, everything is possible. But by and large, younger people these days seem to have it a lot harder compared to our parents and our grandparents. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And sometimes people really try to figure this out, and they get caught up in the minutia and the tiny, seemingly, at least comparatively irrelevant details about, oh, well, housing prices, this and this, that, and oh, was it this specific policy? And I think that while all that discussion has merit, the overarching issue is much simpler and easier to understand, and it's a broad series of social policies and really attitudes that aim to do one simple thing, which is help people in the now, in the short term, at the expense of people in the future, at the expense of the long term. And there's no big conspiracy theory. It's not aliens, lizard people, it's not the cabal of Bilderbergs or whatever. It's just simple incentives and simple human nature, where politicians come to power and need to convince you and sell you and gift you stuff to get you to vote for them now. As Barack Obama would say, today. Today. And they don't really care what you think about them 30 years from now. I'm sure some of them have some idea that they'd love to be remembered as a hero, but what they're most concerned about by far is getting elected, in a few months, or right, my upcoming election is coming, or this, that. They're not concerned about, oh, well, geez, I wonder how 45 years from now these people's children will be able to deal with the increased debt from the policies I'm making, right? They don't do this. And this maybe seems like it's just so simple and so true that I think it's a little hard for some people to accept. But this is why you don't own a home. This is why your wages, relatively, right, not counting inflation, right, of course you make a higher dollar amount, but when you take inflation into account, your wages are so much less than your parents and your grandparents, right? Why, when you go to buy a house, it takes years and years and years of your salary. Whereas your grandpa probably came out of high school, got a factory job, and had a 3 or 4 bedroom house by the time he was 20. Right? And we all know versions of this story. So, the really simple thing, the real unbelievable but true reason why this is all going on is because we've again and again and again and again had policies where it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it will increase the debt, which is, please connect these things, guys. This is such a connector. You do things where it's like, oh, the debt doesn't matter, right? It's not a big deal. We don't talk about debt much. Who really cares? We can just print money whenever we want to. When you have a policy that helps people right now, but creates debt that people in the future have to pay off, this is A, politics, pretty much, but this is B, why things are going downhill. It's so simple. If you're not grasping it, it's just maybe it's because it's too simple. I'm telling you. The logic is just indefeatable. Policies that are entirely short-term aimed hurt long-term prosperity. Okay? It's that simple. And so in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, when they just started rolling out all of these feel-good policies, where it's like, yeah, man, you should be able to just kick back after you hit a certain age and just collect a bunch of money and retire and get everything taken care of and paid for. And I like that. I'm not even being facetious. That sounds excellent to me. I love the sound of it. But you should be able to do that. And who cares if it costs us a bunch of money? Because, you know, we can pay off the debt, right? I mean, it's going to work out, right? And people just do this again and again and again. And we have this enormous welfare state now, and we have these enormous social safety nets, and we have programs like Social Security. And I don't mind these social safety net programs, and I actually genuinely like the idea of them. But the problem is the reality of the math. And it has been on the side of the short-term stuff, I can promise you. You look at the math. And yes, people pay in. And some people pay in more than they take out. But by and large, day to day, year to year, people are taking more benefits than they are paying in. And this manifests in debt. And the longer you go, just adding to that debt, the harder it's going to be in the future. Most of you guys know this, right? You have enough understanding of your personal economics, your personal finances, that you know if you had a credit card and you got $3,000 or $4,000 on there and you owe them a bunch of money, you need to start paying that off. And if you just keep adding money to your debt all the time, you know, especially if you're older, you might be able to just float that boat for quite some time and just, you know, maybe you'll switch between credit card to credit card, right? Some people do that, where you get an offer in the mail for like, oh, 0% interest. I'll just put it on that credit card. And you push it off and push it off. But do you know what happens when you die? Maybe you don't know. I'm going to tell you. When you die, if you have a bunch of credit card debt, it's now for your children. It's now for your spouse, if they're alive, right? But that is passed on. It doesn't just disappear and evaporate. It has to have something done with it, and in reality it's passed on to your children. Now, I think the thing that happens is people understand that. Genuinely, most people, I mean, not everyone understands that, obviously, but most people listening to me, you guys are very intelligent, you understand that. I think the disconnect comes when we think of like country economics and government economics as being this big, crazy beast that is just so hard to understand. And you have words like quantitative easing and interest rates and this and that and all the Federal Reserves, banknotes, but and they want to make it seem so complicated, but it's not such a complicated issue to understand, really. There are complicated aspects, but the simpleness of what I'm saying applies just as well to you and your credit card debt as it does to the government or the state and their debt. And it's the same thing. You just keep building up that credit card debt. One day you die, you got to pass that on to your kids. And the state just keeps building up all this debt for you for different social programs going on right now so that we can have our welfare and our extensive welfare, and we can have our Obama phones, and we can have all this Social Security, and we can have all these retirement pensions, and all these city workers can get all this money, and all these government employees can be paid so well. Wonderful. Everyone's just, you know, getting all this money. But we just keep adding to the debt. And what happens when I die? With all this debt, same thing as if you have a bunch of credit card debt. It gets passed on to the next generation. It's passed on to the next generation. Is that making it clear now? Why you cannot afford a house, but your parents could? I really hope it is, because it's a very, very simple issue. And I would like to think that perhaps in this generation, we can stop repeating the mistake. Thank you.